Zach Wilson and the Denver Broncos offense couldn't get in rhythm during Friday's open practice in front of Broncos Country. Is there reason to be concerned about the offense early on? We'll dive deep into that and much more here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into yet another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Zach Wilson getting his opportunity to run with the Broncos' first team offense during day 3 of Broncos Training Camp as we take you deeper inside the action here. Overall for the offense, not a great showing on the day, but will that bounce back in Saturday's practice? You get that much more here on today's episode of the show. We'll really highlight what you're going to expect here today. The Broncos defense the last couple of days have been able to generate pressure on Broncos QBs on the offense a little bit. We'll dive deep into that. Brandon Jones had a hamstring injury pop up, which leads to yet another injury at the safety position, prompting should the Broncos maybe go out there and re-sign Justin Simmons. We'll revisit that, but we're obviously going to dive deep into here to start off the show. Zach Wilson getting his opportunity to run the first team offense on the afternoon here. And for him, it's the first open practice that Broncos Country was able to attend. I was able to meet a Broncos listener here of the show, Ven Penn on Twitter. Was great meeting you. And so if you're out there at training camp, you see me, say hi to me. Love to interact with Broncos Country here. But in terms of saying hi to Broncos Country, Zach Wilson was the first quarterback on deck in 7-on-7 and the team period. The overall order for the rotation on the afternoon was Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, and then Bo Nix running with the third team offense. And for anyone that maybe just attended this practice or, this is the first news on the quarterback rotation that you're following, this has been standard since OTAs. Sean Payton rotating guys on a daily basis. Bo Nix got it initially on Thursday. Jarrett Stidham had the first team reps on Wednesday. Zach Wilson on Friday. So will it go back to Stidham on Saturday? That's the question that we have here, obviously, as we get ready to dive deeper into training camp. But how did the offense look? If you were there, Broncos Country, it wasn't really something that you're like, yeah, I'm excited about early on, which I will say has been a little bit different than what we have seen, us in the media, in the practices we've been able to attend to. Friday's practice in general, I felt like was a little bit of a letdown by the offensive side of the ball. And it had nothing necessarily to do with just Zach Wilson himself, Jarrett Stidham, or Bo Nix. It just seemed like the defense had a lot more energy on the afternoon against the offense. And look, the offense made some plays. It was really hit and miss on the day, but nothing special, nothing really stood out about any of the quarterbacks. Though I will say when we look at Zach Wilson here, he did have a nice off-balance throw in the first team period to Josh Reynolds for a nice gain, a nice pickup. But overall, there was really just a lot of incompletions thrown by Broncos QBs on the afternoon. You saw them really working and focusing on the short to intermediate passing game here. And, I think that's an important element because I think those windows that you're going to see at 5 to 10 yards, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, you're going to see those worked in. But Denver is going to try to build this offense to run the football effectively, which I will say, Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin had some nice runs on the afternoon. Audric Estime continues to run with some confidence. It's going to be fun to see as the running game kind of transitions and gets going a little bit with the competition that's going on at that position. And obviously there's competition on the offensive line. But I think from when Friday's practice, you just want to see the offense come out with more energy. They didn't do that. There were some exciting plays by some guys, but there wasn't anything that really stood out to like, okay, this is needle moving in the eyes of, I think, the excitement meter here for Broncos Country. Bo Nix had a couple of nice passes, but, he was under duress. He had some missed throws, some incompletions. Jarrett Stidham had some missed throws, some incompletions as well. It was not a clean day, I think, when we just look back at how the offense performed. And look, that's okay, right? But I want to exercise caution here as we dive deeper into the offense here. Broncos Country, we have to remember here, they haven't even thrown the pads on just yet. The pads are going to come on during Monday's practice. We'll obviously have you covered with that. But to me, I think that's where we can really start to see the evaluation come through a little bit. Like, how does the offensive line work when they're actually able to engage with somebody who's using pads and they have pads. Like, that's how you played the game of football. So how much of this early practice stuff should we be investing serious evaluation, mental fortitude, whatever it may be, into it? I don't think we should exhaust our energy necessarily on that. Now, I think there are things you can evaluate in terms of various position battles that you don't necessarily need pads to really determine, or like say, hey, okay, this guy's doing this well. The quarterback play, I would say for all three of these guys here, and Sean Payton touched on this after practice, they have protected the football from turnovers, which is a good thing. Now, there was a near interception. Bo Nix in the final team period had a play. He was under duress from the left side, dipped up underneath, tried to rocket a pass to the sideline there, went a little high. Reese Taylor, I thought, did a great job disguising his coverage as the cornerback. He kind of sunk underneath. It looked like maybe a little bit of cover too, not sure, but he sunk and got depth on the initial guy that was there, saw the ball traveling with some depth, and then rose up, almost intercepted it. It felt incomplete. The sideline went crazy for Reese Taylor, who did make a close play on the football. But I would say early on, if we're going through a report card here, the quarterbacks have not yet thrown an interception here in any of these practices. They've protected it, which is a good sight to see. And I think that's the ultimate goal, okay? When you're at the quarterback position specifically, are you getting the ball out of your hands quickly? From the time you get the snap, are you going through your quick progressions, 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be, in whatever order it may be? I don't know what that is yet. That's obviously information that those QBs will know. We won't know that information. But from the time you get the snap in your hands to the time you go to deliver, do you have confidence? Now, I'd say an issue with Zach Wilson that's been evident. There are times where Zach will catch the snap, he'll drop back, he'll look to his initial guy, it's not there, and so he kind of double clutches it. He kind of brings that left hand a little bit off the ball and then back. That's something he's got to get out of his arsenal a little bit, because that has led to, in 7-on-7, sometimes holding onto the football or leading to him scramble with the football there. You can't do that in 7-on-7. It's a throwing drill. It's designed to be for the quick passing game, to get that chemistry down pat. I would say for the most part, Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, I would say when it comes to delivery and getting rid of the football, they have done a consistent job. Overall, though, on Friday, neither of the quarterbacks really accurate on the afternoon. So in my opinion, nothing to be too concerned about just yet. They'll have one more practice on Saturday at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. But then the pads come on Monday. That's where our evaluation gets deeper and more meaningful, and that's where I think we should invest the most stock here. So will the Broncos offense come out with a little bit more energy on Saturday? That's the question that we'll leave with them here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But, for the most part this offseason, the Broncos have been clean in the injury side of things, though they did have an injury pop up to newly acquired safety Brandon Jones, who's dealing with a hamstring injury. What's the prognosis? What's the potential timeline? How are the Broncos approaching it? How does it impact the depth at the safety position? And does this give credence to the fact that the Broncos maybe been forced to look back into re-signing Justin Simmons, which wouldn't be a bad thing? You're going to get all that and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is what helps keep your number one ride or die alive. eBay Motors, they have everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. They've got everything that you need. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they've got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Once again, that's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. As we dive deeper in today's episode, Locked On Broncos, Brandon Jones dealing with a hamstring injury that popped up on Friday, held him out of team period. How does this impact the Broncos defense? That's something you're going to get here on today's episode of the show. I just want to say thank you once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much for making the podcast exactly what it is, Broncos country. But I think there are some concerns right now about the Broncos on the safety position, at least, I mean, obviously we knew coming into training camp, Caden Stearns was on the PUP list. He's continuing to make good progress. He's going through the conditioning phase. The Broncos' emphasis with him in terms of Sean Payton saying the road, he's got a little bit of a road ahead of him, is more along the lines of the fact that they want to be smart. They're not going to rush Caden back before he's ready. He hasn't done any football-related drills or moves in over a year because of this knee injury. They're going to play it smart. And with this hamstring issue popping up for Brandon Jones, who the team acquired in NFL free agency, this is also something that they're going to monitor. Now, I noticed initially before practice, he did come out. He was one of the first guys out there. Baron Browning was the first guy out there on the day. Brandon Jones came out with his jersey and kind of did some light jogging and things like that. I think he did some stretch work there, but then he walked around the field a few times, I think really just to test the hamstring. He had some KT tape there from what we noticed, but I didn't notice that was something that was going to linger into team. So the Broncos held him out of obviously the team drills here, obviously on Friday. So that meant that you got to see a little bit more PJ Locke and Devin Key. You got to see a little bit more JL Skinner. And the Broncos defense, it didn't seem like in Friday's practice that they really missed a beat or that they had any areas of concern as they really got the best of the offense. We mentioned it earlier. They came out with way more energy, and I think it was contagious. They spread down from the first team unit to the second team defense to the third team defense. There was a good rotation of guys, and there were opportunities to make plays on the football or, as we've seen with the defensive line, generate pressure on all three quarterbacks on the afternoon. And so that allows guys like Skinner and Key and PJ and Tanner McAllister, other guys getting involved in the mix. It gives them opportunities to go and make plays on the football. But with this hamstring injury to Brandon Jones, Sean Payton didn't necessarily give us a definitive timeline for when we might be able to expect him back in action. And this is something you have to be careful with. And look, Denver, unfortunately, has had a history over the last handful of years of hamstring injuries. And I think a lot of people equated that to the strength and conditioning program. Look, these guys are fast. They have great footwork and they move at different levels. They change directions very quickly. Hamstring injuries can pop up. It has nothing to do with their strength and conditioning program, but you do see that maybe, okay, hey, this is a new environment for a guy like Brandon Jones, who came over from Florida. And look, Florida gets very humid. It gets very hot. We all saw that in the Broncos' 70-point debacle against Miami this past season where the sun was on them the entire game. Players have told me that was one of the worst experiences they've ever had there. Outside of the end result and the outcome in that game, but just the elements of really just having the sun scorching on them the entire time down there in South Beach. Aside from that, though, it is worth noting that Brandon Jones, during OTAs, did miss a couple of days due to an injury. I think it was a calf or a lower leg stuff. So not sure, is that like something that's lingering? Is this a hamstring injury that maybe lingered from OTAs? It was designated, I think, as a calf or a quad in OTAs. I mean, there's not an official injury report during that time. So now it's like, okay, this is something that popped up. Is this something that's lingering from before? And certainly this is going to take some time for the Broncos because you got to be smart with the hamstrings. You can't rush guys back. We saw what had happened initially. Like Greg Dulcich went through the rehab process the right way last season after the week 1 injury, made one move during the Kansas City Chiefs game in which he came back. I believe it was week 6, week 7. And then all of a sudden that held him out almost the rest of the season. And it had nothing to do with the progress that he made. It's just, your body responds to different movements and different things, in certain ways. And, there are things that you can do. Maybe it has something to do with hydration. But, I mean, these guys are in the best shape. They have great, I'd say, on-campus support, nutritionists. I mean, they have everything that they need to have success in the health and nutrition department, even when it comes to meal planning. But, for a guy like Brandon Jones, obviously the Broncos invested in him in free agency. Don't know what the timeline is here definitively, but don't expect him, I think, to practice for at least the next week or so. But it's something that could change. This is just my own personal speculation. There's nothing official to report on that. It's just knowing what we know about the history of hamstring injuries and how the Broncos and Bo Lowry want to attack it. I would not expect to see Brandon Jones getting a lot of reps here, maybe for the next week or so. That could change, but you get more opportunities with the competition at that position for guys like Devin Key, JL Skinner to get more looks and also get looks with the first team defense to be able to utilize maybe their skill sets a little bit, to showcase the coaching staff. Like, hey, if there is an injury, we know this guy can step in and maybe make a couple of plays. That's where you can be at. But I'm going to take it one step further here. For the Broncos in this situation, look, Caden Stearns will be back for the Broncos. Brandon Jones will be back for Denver. Delarian Turner is making great progress in his recovery from ACL. And then you have Devin Key, Tanner McAllister, J.L. Skinner. Is this type of moment here where Jones pops up with this hamstring injury, is it a reason for the Broncos to maybe go back and see if they can re-sign Justin Simmons? Now, we don't know what the market is looking like. We don't know what Justin is necessarily seeking, but the opportunity to come back and play, like Justin's still in Denver. Justin lives in Denver. His family's in Denver. He loves it in Denver. And he's staying ready. He's still training. My question is does this open the door for that to become a possibility, even if it is on a one-year deal? And if that is the case, the Broncos do decide to do that, how do you manage the rotation at that position when guys like Caden come back or, when Brandon comes back from his hamstring injury? I think the team needs Justin Simmons. I think they'd be better off with Justin Simmons. It's a level of security and comfort. It's a veteran presence. You know what you're getting from him. You don't have to worry about his type of production or impact. He's the one guy I think you can always look on the field and say, you know what, I have no questions about his ability to produce, to make plays, to get the defense lined up in the right position. We've seen the Broncos without Justin Simmons, and we've seen how they are with him. They're much better defensively when he's on the field. So is this something that they do revisit? I think is a valid question that we should be asking here on today's episode of the show. The personnel game kind of changes. And look, you are, and this is where I think it gets tricky in training camp, you are one injury away from saying like, okay, we need to reevaluate our depth here. We need to reevaluate what our vision is, because if you lose one key guy, or let's say you lose two guys, one guy's a key guy, another guy's a role player, how does that impact maybe what you want to do on the back end of the secondary at that specific position? And I think that is where we don't necessarily have the answers. I know this is something that the Broncos, George Payton, the scouting department, they're probably monitoring everything that's going on. And I'm sure maybe there are conversations being had behind closed doors where maybe it is open for Justin to come back in Denver. I mean, the opportunity is there. I know he has interest from a couple of NFL teams, but I don't know where he may be leaning on going, or if the team is making a significant offer. If it has anything to do financially, I'm not sure. But Justin's not that type of guy in terms of that, and especially with the market changing. So I want to ask you, Broncos Country, do you think this should be an opportunity for the Broncos? If this is something for Brandon Jones that lingers for quite a bit of time, should they maybe look at bringing back Justin? It would boost the Broncos defense significantly. You have him and PJ. And I don't think it would be harder for him to pick up the playbook, even though he hasn't been there at OTAs or for the start of training camp. I think this is something that they absolutely should take a look at. I know our good friend Sayre Bedinger wrote an article over there at predominantlyorange.com once the news came out about Brandon Jones, saying, hey, like kind of banging the table. This is where the Broncos need to re-sign Justin Simmons. Not sure what that looks like. Not sure what the financials of that would look like, or how it impacts depth when guys do get healthy. And you want to get a look at these younger guys like the Caden Stearns, and you have young guys like J.L. Skinner and Devin Key emerging. It presents some dilemmas, I think, for the front office. But, I mean, if you're trying to win games and you need the best 11 players on defense, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer that if you need it at the safety position, Justin is one of those guys, very close in our locker room with a lot of the guys as well. So we'll see how that kind of formulates here. Broncos Country, want to know your thoughts here on the potential of re-signing Justin Simmons, your level of concern with the injury to Brandon Jones. This is something that we will continue to monitor here on the show, but we're going to dive deeper into some of our key observations and a couple of players who stood out during Friday's training camp practice in front of Broncos Country. We harped on a little bit earlier, the defense generating pressure on the offense 2 days in a row. Who were some names that stood out? You're going to get that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you find quality professionals that are right for your role and your job. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools that will help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So find the right teammate here today by utilizing LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn, they're not just a job board. They help you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. They even help you hire people who may not even be actively looking for a new job, but those who might be open for a perfect role. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users, they don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses, they're wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or the resources to hire, and they're constantly finding ways to improve and make the process easier. They just launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process quicker for those who are hiring. So make sure you post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we'll analyze some of the key standouts from day 3 of Broncos Training Camp. So we take you deep inside Broncos camp here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. Thanks to all the everydayers and first listeners out there every single day. We appreciate you so much here. Let's open up some key observations, news, and notes here as we dive into the final portion of today's episode of the show. As I mentioned earlier, for Broncos Country, I felt like this was a disappointing practice to attend in terms of, hey, it's the first training camp practice session. The energy, I think, by the fan base, they were loud, they were cheering. Anytime that there was a big play or a player ran by them on the burn, players were going crazy. You saw Omar Brown, right before practice even began, he was doing cartwheels and backflips in front of the crowd, getting them all fired up. Like, the fan base is excited because Broncos football is here. It's right around the corner, a couple weeks away from a preseason game. But you wanted, I think, the expectation to be, could you have a more energetic practice? That, I think, is where we'll maybe see a change, to see a little bit of a tune change there for the Broncos in Saturday's practice, at least hopefully for the offense. The defense, they had a lot of energy. They were flying around. They were having fun. Position groups were making plays on the football, and they were celebrating a lot when there was incomplete passes or pressures or sacks, which the defense, I'd say this, the guys who stood out to me on the defensive side of the ball to generate pressure, looking at guys like Thomas Incoom, we're looking at Zach Allen, Baron Browning, John Franklin Myers is an anchor there on the defensive line. They were having good reps, I think, against the Broncos offense in the various units, first, second, and third team units, where these guys were standing out by generating pressure, beating their man. And look, I'd say a guy who struggled offensively was Alex Palczewski. There were a couple of times he got bull rushed and pushed back to where the quarterback had to bow out or even step up inside and then try to bow out because of the pressure there. I want to reference back to it, though. What matters is, does this stuff happen continuously when the pads come on? Now, this, I think, is where things are going to get interesting, because when the pads come on Monday, yeah, you bet your bottom dollar I'm watching this offensive line that the Broncos have invested so much money in financially. And then you have the center position. Luke Wattenberg's been the primary guy getting the reps there for the Broncos offense. And then I want to watch this defensive line with Zach Allen, who got a big payday last year, John Franklin Myers, who comes over from the New York Jets, and then you have DJ Jones, and then you have a rotation of other guys like Angelo Blackson getting in the mix. Darrell Chami has been a name over the last couple of days, number 53 outside linebacker, who's been able to generate pressure on quarterbacks. And then I think you got to look at Baron Browning. It is a wonderful sight to see Baron fully healthy. He's out there. He's energetic. His first step is lethal. Him and Jonathan Cooper, they're having success and they're having fun, because I think that defensive line, with the addition of Franklin Myers, DJ Jones playing at a spot where he feels probably the most comfortable, and then Zach Allen, the way that they're attacking, it is creating a little bit of problems here for the Broncos offense. But I want to say this as well. You're not able to engage fully without the pads the way that you would in a game. So this is, I think, the biggest thing we need to keep our eyes on as Monday's practice approaches here, and we'll continue to monitor it as well. I'm going to give a shout-out to Reese Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, almost had the near interception of Bo Nix. I thought he just, once again, did a great job in his disguise coverage, being able to make a play on the football. The rest of the DBs on that left sideline were hopeful that he was going to come down with an interception, but they were giving him head pats on the helmet. They were smacking him on the rear end there. They were excited for him. And look, Denver at cornerback has a lot of guys getting reps, have a lot of guys getting opportunities in terms of reps. And also, I'd say, just looks in the passing game. Art Green, another player who stood out, in my opinion, for the Broncos. Once again, I did an article prior to day 3 of practice for milehighsports.com. Make sure you go check it out. But I mentioned 4 players that Broncos fans need to keep their eye on who are under the radar. It was Devin Key as one of them, J.L. Skinner as another, Art Green at cornerback, and then Darrell and Chami outside linebacker. Those are the names that I kind of highlighted. And that's going to still be my preferential 4 players that I'd say, hey, Broncos Country, when you go out to Saturday's practice, make sure you keep an eye on number 28. You keep an eye on number 34. You keep an eye on number 26. and obviously number 53. As you go out there and you watch these positions, you watch the rotation there. That's what I'm a little excited about. And I'm excited for the pads to come on ultimately on Monday. There was a special teams play too that I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this when we're talking about standouts there. Trenton Gill, who's obviously in a punting competition with Riley Dixon, he had a punt on the afternoon that landed, bounced, I think at the 6-yard line, was rolling, going to go into the end zone. Tremont Smith, no surprise, Tremont Smith, the gunner for the Broncos, goes down there, brings his hand forward, swipes it from going out of the end zone for a touchback. It lands on the 2 or 3 yard line, and then Michael Bandy falling on it to secure the recovery. It would have pinned the opposing team inside the 3 yard line. You love to see those types of plays because that's what's going to help you with field positioning in the regular season. And then Michael Bandy, who made that play on special teams on the benefactor of what Tremont Smith did in Trenton Gill's punt, he went out there. I think when we're talking about offensive players who maybe stood out a little bit, Michael Bandy was a consistent target for Zach Wilson, for Bo Nix, and for Jarrett Stidham. And there was this one play where Bo was in the final team period of the Broncos offense this afternoon. There was a crossing play where Michael Bandy's coming underneath, and you could see the setup there, right? But you look at Bo, Bo's not even looking at him. Bo knows that he's going to be at a certain spot, though, and he just zipped the pass, and you could hear it. I just remember we were in the back end because there's a tent, and then there's obviously the media side there, but there's a tent where we actually got to, watch it, and we're close to the action a little bit. You could hear, like, the velocity of the throw and also Bandy catching it and then getting yards upfield after the catch. Like, I know it's not inspiring for me to come on this show, Broncos Country, and say, you know what, the offensive standout of the day, if we're taking a look at anybody at the receiver position, it was Michael Bandy, right? I know Broncos Country sitting there like, we're talking about Michael Bandy. Look, he may not make the 53-man roster. I mean, I think he could. I don't see it happening, but I think regardless, he will be on the team's practice squad. I mean, there's a lot invested in him. I think Joe Lombardi's got a lot of interest in him. And I also think that Sean has kind of seen that, he's not the biggest guy, but he's fast. He's a blue collar, like lunch pail and hard hat type of guy. He's consistent on a daily basis, consistent with his routes, runs it to the right depth, consistent in terms of being a pass catcher, whether that's down the field, whether that's in the short to intermediate, or whether it's on the underneath stuff there. So those are some things that, we'll highlight here from day 3 of Broncos training camp. Once again, folks, not the most inspiring performance by the offense here, but we're going to continue to monitor this. Will they come out with more energy in Saturday's practice? That's what we'll leave you with here on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. But with that said, Broncos Country, we'll be out there at Saturday's practice, once again at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. We'll give you all the recap on tomorrow's episode, Lockdown Broncos. You can get that wherever you get your podcast or available on YouTube. Thanks for making us your first listen. For your second listen of the day, make sure you go check out the Locked On NFL podcast as you get insight from what's going on from the local experts on the biggest stories around the entire Locked On NFL network as training camp continues. We got experts, boots on the ground all across training camp as we take you here on the Locked On Podcast Network inside Broncos camp. You'll get all that and much more on tomorrow's episode of the show.